I walked into the kitchen, the sunlight hitting the oak countertop in a way that had always made the apartment feel warm, even on a cold Pittsburgh morning. I poured a cup of coffee and watched Grace, my wife of 4 years, nervously fiddling with her laptop. Today was the day. After 4 years of relentless saving, of saying no to vacations and new cars, of carefully tracking every dollar, we were finally going to put an offer on the Cape Cod house in the Brooklyn neighborhood. It was the house that had driven every decision I had made since we got married. Every extra hour I worked, every cheap lunch I ate, every weekend I spent home instead of seeing family, it was all for that house. I had convinced myself that this financial security, this tangible symbol of success, was the only thing that could prevent the chaos and instability I grew up with. "You look like you are about to take a final exam," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Grace smiled a little too brightly. "Just making sure I have all the figures ready for the realtor. You know how I am with numbers." And that was the arrangement. Grace had convinced me that she was better with money. She handled the transfers, the investments, and the spreadsheets. I was the earner, she was the manager. It seemed logical. I preferred the clean lines of code at work. She preferred the clean lines of a projected balance sheet. And in my mind, that distance, that trust, felt like a mature, secure partnership. The realtor called at 9 o'clock exactly. The house was still available. "Okay, Grace," the realtor chirped. "We are ready to submit the bid. I just need confirmation of the exact down payment amount we are working with. Can you pull up the total savings balance, Grace?" Grace nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. I stood right behind her, my heart thumping a steady, excited rhythm. This was it. The culmination of 48 months of sacrifice. We should have had at least $180,000 in that account, maybe more with interest. 60% of my paycheck, every single time, gone directly into that account. I watched her mouse hesitate over the online banking portal. She clicked. The page loaded slowly, agonizingly. When the balance appeared, she gasped, a small, choked sound she tried instantly to cover with a cough. She quickly tried to hit the back button. "Wait," I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "What is it? Did you log into the wrong account?" She shook her head, her eyes wide. I leaned down and looked over her shoulder. The number on the screen, centered right next to the account name that clearly matched the one I had deposited into for 4 years, was 12.37. $12, not $12,000. Not a typo, 12 actual dollars and 37 cents. I laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. It was the only way my brain could process something so profoundly absurd. "What is this?" I asked, the lightness immediately draining from my voice. I gripped her shoulder a little harder. "Grace, tell me you logged into the wrong account. Tell me this is the grocery fund." She slowly shook her head again, unable to meet my eyes. The color had drained completely from her face. I had never seen her look so terrified. "I do not understand," I said, my voice dangerously level. I pulled up the transaction history, forcing her to watch. "For 4 years, I have transferred 60% of my income into this account, like clockwork. Show me the transfers, the investments. Show me where the money went." "It is complicated, Brett," she whispered. "Please, just let me explain it later. Do not worry the realtor." I ignored her and looked down the screen. My transfers were all there, running deep into the history. Every 2 weeks, the large deposit labeled with my name. Then I looked for her contributions. There were a few large deposits from the first 6 months of our marriage. Then they stopped, completely. For the remaining 3.5 years, there were only 2 things happening in the account. My deposits came in, and money went out. $180,000, gone. And the last thing I heard in my head before the full, sickening weight of the betrayal hit me was the echo of her voice from years ago. My wife convinced me that we were saving money to buy our dream house. I realized, standing there looking at that pathetic balance, that she had been the one convincing me, year after year, that this whole arrangement was real. I had been living on 40% of my paycheck, meticulously rationing every penny, while she had been draining the fund as quickly as I could fill it. The sense of stability I had built my marriage on was a $12.37 lie. I pulled my hand from Grace's shoulder, stepping back as if touching her might contaminate me. My analytical mind, which usually thrived on order, was now furiously trying to categorize the chaos. I had to know. I had to reject the impossible and find the logical error. But the error was right there, staring at me from the screen. You have not contributed a single dollar since we took that trip to the Poconos, 6 months after our wedding. I stated, my voice flat. And yet, my money was being spent. Where? Did you move it all to the wrong investment account? Grace turned away from the laptop, folding her arms tight across her chest. She looked small, defensive. I told you it is complicated, Brett. I was managing the money and I made some bad judgment calls. Some really bad investments. What investments? I demanded. Grace, you have always told me that stocks were too risky. You lectured me for buying a lottery ticket once. You showed me spreadsheets with guaranteed interest rates. What exactly did you invest in? Show me the brokerage statements. She wouldn't look at me. I cannot right now. The account is complicated. I was trying to play the stock market, trying to make the money grow faster so we could buy a bigger house. I was embarrassed when I lost money. I thought I could make it back before you noticed. I thought I could fix it before the house came up. The lie was flimsy, transparent. I knew her better than that. Grace had never mentioned trading research or following the markets. That level of reckless risk taking was completely antithetical to the persona she had carefully cultivated as the responsible partner. She was stalling. She was minimizing. She was trying to shift the focus from her actions to my reaction. Grace, if you were investing, there are brokerage accounts. There are statements. You can pull them up right now. I need to see the name of the firm, the dates of the losses, the transactions. Where is the $180,000, Grace? Tell me the truth. She sighed dramatically, a performance designed to make me feel like the aggressor. This is exactly why I did not want to show you the account. You are micromanaging. You are getting aggressive. I am trying to tell you that I made a mistake, a financial mistake, and you are treating me like a criminal. That was the manipulation, the gaslighting, that I had allowed for years. Every time I had asked to see the actual bank balance instead of the neat, color-coded projections, she had shut me down with that same phrase of, "Do not you trust me? We are married, Brett. This is our future. Why do you need to micromanage every little thing?" I had swallowed my doubt then, equating trust with love, equating dependence with security. I had been terrified of being the husband who didn't trust his wife, the one who was controlling or paranoid. I had kept transferring my 60% and living off my meager remaining 40%, eating the same rotation of cheap sandwiches and pasta salads, driving the same beat-up Nissan Sentra that needed new brake pads, all because I thought we were a team. "You stop right there," I said, pointing a finger at her. My voice was low, lethal. "You stop trying to make this my fault. You stop trying to change the subject. There is no legitimate investment that vanishes $180,000 without a paper trail. I need the truth, and I need it now, or I am walking across the street to the police station." She flinched. The threat of authority, of real-world consequence, momentarily broke her composure. I was going to pay it back. She insisted, rushing the words out. I was going to get a promotion, a side job, anything. I just needed more time. Time you were not going to get because the house was listed 3 weeks ago. I pointed out. We were ready to put an offer in today. You have known for months we did not have the money, but you let me go to showings. You let me plan furniture and paint colors. You let me call the realtor. She just stared at me silent. The lie had run its course. The financial defense was exhausted. The shift in the conflict had begun. It was no longer about if the money was gone, but of where it went, and why she chose to deceive me for so long. I looked at the laptop, the screen still open to the transaction history, and I knew the answer was buried in the hundreds of expenditures that had bled the account dry. I knew I would not believe anything else she said. I needed an outside perspective. I needed Stacy. Grace retreated to the bedroom and slammed the door. The sound echoed in the apartment, a childish gesture that only solidified my resolve. I knew the game was not over. If she was hiding in there, she was either calculating her next lie or deleting evidence. I reached for my phone and called Stacy. Stacy was my best friend since college, a journalist who had an unnerving knack for cutting through noise and getting to the core truth. I laid out the entire story, the 4 years of saving, the strict budget, the $12.37 final balance, and Grace's pathetic lie about bad investments. Stacy was quiet for a long moment. "I am so sorry, Brett. That is devastating." Then her professional skepticism kicked in. "Okay, put the emotion aside for a second. The investments are a diversion. People who are lying about six figures do not use stocks as an excuse unless they know nothing about them. Tell me about the spending coming out." I explained that the account was joint, but Grace managed the online access. I saw a long list of recurring transfers I did not recognize. "The spending is the key," Stacy stated. "Forget the bank statements for a minute. People are lazy. Check her computer history. See what she has been obsessed with for the last 4 years. If she was spending that much money, she was spending that much time." Stacy's comment was a cold, necessary bucket of water. I realized I had the tool I needed right here. I walked to the bedroom door and knocked hard. "Grace, I need your laptop," I announced through the wood. "I am working on getting the statements, Brett. Please give me space." She called back, her voice tight. "No. I am checking your browser history to see what you have actually been doing for the last 4 years, since you clearly were not investing our money," I stated. She opened the door, her face a mask of indignation. "That is a violation of my privacy, Brett. You cannot do that." "Privacy?" I laughed, the sound hollow. "You stole $180,000 from me and destroyed our future. You have zero claim to privacy. Either you hand over the laptop, or I call Francis right now and ask him what my options are for getting access to evidence of fraud." Francis, my brother-in-law, being a police detective, carried the necessary weight. She immediately backed down, grabbing the computer from her nightstand and handing it to me. "You are not going to find anything," she muttered. "I told you what happened. You are just going to waste your time and make yourself more upset." I took the laptop back to the kitchen table, the silence of the empty apartment punctuated only by the clicking of the keys. The transaction history was still open on the screen, showing months of recurring debits. I opened the browser and scrolled back. At first, it was mundane recipes, online shopping, travel blogs. But then I started looking at the timestamps and the recurring links. The pattern became obvious and deeply unsettling. YouTube videos that led to external live streams, Reddit threads discussing online personalities, Twitch streams, and they were not gaming content. They were all women. Women playing games, women doing makeup tutorials, women just sitting there talking to their chat. I clicked on a few profiles. The usernames were distinct, and they appeared over and over, hours at a time, sometimes multiple times a day. She had streams open for 6, 7, even 8 hours straight, according to the timestamps, every single day for years. Then I checked the bookmarks. There they all were. Direct links to 5 or 6 streamers' Twitch channels, their Instagram accounts, their Twitter. And at the very bottom, hidden beneath the social media links, were Patreon pages and OnlyFans accounts. I sat there, staring at the screen, the magnitude of the truth hitting me with the force of a physical blow. The money was not lost. It was the entry fee to a world of transactional emotional validation. I went back to the joint savings transaction history, now armed with the names. I typed in Twitch, Patreon, OnlyFans. The screen filled with hundreds of transactions, stretching back years. Twitch subscriptions, Twitch bits, Patreon pledges, OnlyFans payments. Some were $5, some were $50, some were $200. There was a recent one from last month for $500 to someone's Patreon. I did the math quickly. In the last 3 months alone, the transactions I could identify for those platforms totaled over $18,000. $18,000 in 90 days on internet streamers, while I drove around with failing brakes and packed the same cheap pasta salad for lunch. The profound grief over my wasted sacrifices was quickly replaced by a cold, searing shame. The money was stolen to pay for a cheap lie. The discovery of the Twitch and OnlyFans payments was a punch to the gut, but the low, sick feeling of dread told me the damage was not contained to just the savings account. I went back to the financial documents I had pulled up, searching for anything else that looked wrong, focusing on the debt side of our ledger. About 2 years ago, I had added Grace as an authorized user on my main credit card. It was a card I barely used, keeping it only for true emergencies or large, tracked purchases like plane tickets. Grace had convinced me it was simply a convenience, a backup in case her card failed when traveling. With my background of financial instability, I had always feared debt, especially high-interest debt, so the card had remained pristine. I logged into that account using my own credentials. What I saw next made me physically ill. The card, which had a balance of near zero just months prior, now carried a total debt of over $12,000. The individual charges were mostly categorized as online services and membership fees, and they followed the same patterns as the bank withdrawals, lining up perfectly with the major streamers Grace was following. When the savings account was low, she simply switched to using my personal credit line to fund her habit. The sheer audacity of the move, not just spending our savings, but putting me into high-interest debt that she kept secret, was staggering. "Grace!" I yelled, pushing away from the kitchen table. I found her still in the bedroom, scrolling through her phone, maintaining the illusion of calm. I held up the laptop, pointed to the credit card debt, and pointed back to the transaction history showing the hundreds of small, bleeding charges. "What is this?" I demanded, throwing the laptop onto the bed beside her. $12,000 in debt on my card. You did not just empty the savings account, you leveraged my credit. Why were you using this card? She shifted uncomfortably, avoiding the screen. I told you I made bad investments. I was trying to manage everything. The card was for emergencies, and this felt like a financial emergency. Spending $200 on someone's Patreon is not a financial emergency. "Grace," I shot back, my voice shaking with cold fury. "It is a financial crime. You were spending my money on internet women, and when you ran out of cash, you spent my future credit on them instead." Grace immediately switched tactics, reverting to minimizing the scale of the destruction. "I was going to pay it off before you noticed. I was managing the statements. It is just debt, Brett. We can pay it off." "With what money?" I challenged. "You have been spending thousands a month, every single month, for almost 4 years. How were you going to save up $200,000 and simultaneously pay off $12,000 in debt while continuing to spend money on these strangers?" She did not have an answer. Instead, she leaned into the emotional defense. "It is not what you think. They are not strangers. I told you I was lonely. I felt isolated. These women, they are part of a community. They appreciate me. They say my name." I felt a surge of nausea at the pathetic, transparent justification. "They appreciate you because you are paying them, Grace. That is their job. You spend $500, they say your name. You are spending a fraction of your 40% income on food and groceries, while making me feel guilty about buying a pair of decent shoes, because we had to save for the house. And all the while, you were dropping $200 on a streamer's birthday donation so she could give you a shout out." I remembered one specific argument 2 years ago. I had wanted to go on a trip to visit my sister's newborn, but Grace had talked me out of it, insisting we could not afford the flight because every penny had to go towards the down payment. My own isolation, my own loneliness had been a direct consequence of her lies and her greed. She manufactured my austerity while living a secret life fueled by my sacrifices. "You do not understand how Twitch works," she insisted, her voice rising in defensive hysteria. "These are real friendships. They remember details about my life. They make me feel important." I looked down at the receipt from the $500 Patreon charge. The memory of all the cheap, tasteless dinners I had eaten rushed into my mind. "They make you feel important because you are their best customer," I whispered. "And you destroyed a real life, a real home, and a real marriage for a cheap 5-second thanks on a live stream." She insisted I was twisting everything around, making it sound worse than it was. She kept repeating that she was going to fix it, that she would cut back, that she would stop. But every word was meaningless. I knew the only way forward was to gather undeniable, specific proof of the entire financial devastation. I had rejected the lie. Now I needed the full, horrifying truth. I knew I needed to stop arguing with Grace. Her words were meaningless, a defensive smokescreen designed to delay the inevitable. If I wanted justice, If I wanted to protect myself from further financial damage, I needed facts that no amount of emotional manipulation could refute. I needed to build a paper trail solid enough for Francis, the police detective, to act on. The next morning, I called off work. I left Grace sleeping, still cloaked in the false peace of her denial, and drove straight to the main branch of our bank downtown. I walked up to the counter and requested something completely comprehensive, a full, itemized, and detailed transaction record for the joint savings account, going back exactly 4 years to the day we opened it. The bank representative, a kindly woman in her 50s, looked at me with an expression of polite concern. "That is quite a long history, sir. Are you sure you do not just need the last 6 months?" "No," I replied firmly. "I need every deposit, every withdrawal, and every memo that exists on the file for 4 years. Every single one." She took my identification and disappeared into a back room. I sat in the lobby, the cold, marble floor grounding me in the reality of the situation. 40 minutes later, she returned, struggling slightly under the weight of a massive stack of paper. "Here you go, sir. 273 pages of records," she said, handing me the packet. I thanked her and retreated to my car in the bank parking lot. The smell of fresh ink and paper filled the sedan as I began my methodical, gruesome work. I started at the beginning. My deposits were there, clear and consistent every 2 weeks, the high-value transfer from my paycheck a direct, visible symbol of my trust and sacrifice. Grace's contribution stopped after month 7. I already knew that. What I did not know was the systematic nature of her spending. This was not random desperate shopping. This was a dedicated, scheduled habit. I started categorizing the recurring monthly charges. Tier 3 Twitch subscriptions to 5 different channels at $25 each. Patreon pledges to 4 separate creators at $50 each minimum. 3 OnlyFans subscriptions at $30 each. I did the quick multiplication. That was already well over $500 a month in fixed, recurring payments before any tips or donations. Then I moved to the tips and donations, the heart of the betrayal. They ranged from $5 to $500, marked often with cryptic usernames I had seen in her browser history. I was no longer just seeing money. I was seeing a timeline of her emotional needs, paid for in cash. The larger tips often correlated with moments I remembered her being particularly stressed or distant from me. I pulled out my calculator and added up the total from the printouts, painstakingly verifying every transaction category. The final staggering number was $192,740, almost $200,000 spent on women who stream video games and post pictures on the internet, all paid for with the money I thought was securing our future. But it was one final section of transactions that made me drop the clipboard on the floor of the car. These were not Twitch or Patreon charges. These were direct bank transfers, 20 separate transactions over the last year and a half, ranging from $200 to $800 each. They were all sent to the same recipient, a person named Ela Ramos, $7,000 sent directly. This was a step beyond donations and subscriptions. This was direct financial support, one-on-one. I stared at the name, a fresh wave of humiliation and cold rage washing over me. I did not know who Ela Ramos was, but I knew I was about to find out. I crumpled the top page of the 273-page document in my fist and started the car, driving home to face the final, unavoidable truth. I drove home, the heavy packet of bank records sitting like a stone in the passenger seat. Grace was in the living room, watching a sitcom on the television, the picture of domestic normalcy. The sheer audacity of her maintaining this quiet facade, while having destroyed nearly $200,000 and $12,000 of my credit, was staggering. I walked straight to the sofa and threw the 273 pages of records onto the coffee table. They scattered everywhere. The sheer volume of paper alone seemed to startle her. "Who is Ela Ramos?" I asked. Grace's eyes darted down to the scattered papers, then flicked back up to me. Her face went completely white, a shift so instantaneous it was sickening. "I do not know what you are talking about," she stammered, reaching a shaky hand out for the remote to mute the television. I grabbed the top sheet of paper, the one detailing the direct transfers. "I am talking about the $7,000 you sent directly to someone named Ela Ramos over the last 18 months. not through a subscription service, but a direct bank transfer. Explain that. She tried to grab the documents. I shoved them back at her, forcing her to confront the evidence. You do not get to touch my evidence, Grace. You need to explain this right now, or I am calling Francis. That name broke her. The composure she had been clinging to for 48 hours crumbled. She sank back into the sofa, burying her face in her hands. She is one of the streamers. Grace mumbled into her palms. One of my favorites. She was having trouble. She mentioned on stream that she might have to quit because she could not afford her rent. I stared at her, my blood turning to ice. I felt a cold wave of utter humiliation wash over me. You fell for a scam. You fell for the oldest trick on the internet. And you spent $7,000 of my money, our money, on a pity party for someone you have never met. She pulled her hands away, tears streaming down her face, and attempted to defend the situation. No, it is not like that. She is not like that. She is a genuine person. After I sent the first $500, she messaged me privately. She thanked me personally. She told me I was such a kind and generous person. We talk all the time, Brett. She tells me about her life, her problems, her dreams. I was helping someone I cared about. I lost all control. You are the most pathetic man I have ever met in my entire life, I screamed. She was playing you. She was leveraging her followers' sympathy to pay her bills. She knows your username, Grace, not your real name, not your actual life, not the fact that you have a husband eating the same cheap food every night so you can send her rent money. She tried to defend the emotional nature of the relationship. You do not understand, Brett. We talk. She is one of the few people who actually listens to me. She makes me feel important. She makes you feel important because you pay her too. I countered, shoving the statement into her lap. How many other sad, lonely men are she telling the exact same story to? How many other idiots are sending her car repair money? While you were sitting here with a real, actual human being who loved you. You were chasing a fantasy. It is not a fantasy, she insisted, standing up, finally meeting my gaze. It is a community. It is real. I grabbed my phone and quickly pulled up the streamer's Instagram. I scrolled back through months of posts and found several where she was thanking her top donors. There it was, Grace's username, listed in the highest tier, sometimes mentioned with specific gratitude for her generosity. I showed Grace the screen. Look at that. Are you proud of yourself? Is this worth it, Grace? Being in the top tier of simps for some internet stranger. Is that worth losing your marriage and your chance at ever owning a home? She turned away, tears running down her face. The defenses shifted one last time away from the streamer and onto me. You do not understand how lonely I have been, she cried. You are never really here, Brett, even when you are here. You are always talking about work, always tracking the savings, always distracted. These women actually pay attention to me. They respond to my messages. They remember details. I felt a surge of cold fury at the transparent victim blaming. I was distant because I was exhausted from working full-time and living on 40% of my income, convinced we were saving for our future. I was focused on the savings because I was terrified of being poor again. If you felt invisible, why did you not use your words like an adult instead of stealing money and having an emotional affair with half a dozen women for 4 years? She stammered. I tried to communicate, but you never listened. When, Grace? When did you try to tell me you were unhappy? I asked you to show me the statements, and you lied and called me controlling. You needed to use your words instead of committing fraud like a coward. The confrontation was brutal, and we were trapped in a loop of accusation and deflection, with her clinging desperately to the delusion that she was the victim. That is when the phone rang, breaking the tension like a gunshot. It was my mother. I had told her everything the day before, and she was done being patient. I answered, putting the call on speaker. The final act of the confrontation was about to begin, but this time it would be dictated by the outside world. The phone, resting on the coffee table, projected my mother's voice into the tense silence. Put her on speaker, Brett. I did, holding the phone steady. My father, always the anchor of practical consequences, was also on the line. Grace, this is my mom. She knows everything. My mother started, her voice low and furious. Grace, how could you do this to him? You let him live like a pauper for 4 years. You missed family trips. You let him wear himself out working towards a lie. Grace immediately tried to regain control by shifting the focus, just as she had with me. Mrs. Hayes, please, you do not understand. Our marriage had problems before this. Brett was distant, he was never emotionally available, and I felt invisible in our own home. Then my father cut in, his voice measured but carrying the authority of a retired attorney. That may be a marriage problem, Grace, but theft is a legal one. Distant or not, he was working for you. You gave away nearly $200,000 that was meant for his future. Now are you willing to repay it? Grace stammered. I want to. I will. But it is going to take time. Maybe a few years. A few years is not good enough, my father countered. You have 60 days to come up with a concrete plan to repay at least half of the principal and pay off the credit card debt. If you do not, we will be helping Brett file a police report for theft and petitioning the court for divorce based on financial malfeasance. We are done negotiating your excuses. Grace panicked. You cannot file a police report over marital finances. That is not how it works. We can figure this out. We are married. My father simply said, try us, Grace. The call ended with a sharp click. The external intervention shattered Grace's last shield of denial. Suddenly, her defenses evaporated, replaced by frantic, tearful negotiation. She threw herself at my feet, literally begging. Brett, please. We can fix this. We can sell the old furniture. We can both get second jobs. I will cancel all the subscriptions. I will delete the accounts. We took vows. Brett, for better or for worse. We are supposed to be a team. I looked down at her, feeling utterly cold. The idea of staying with her, of working a second job just to pay off the debt she incurred while chasing internet validation, was sickening. The only thing I felt was intense relief that I was finally free to choose myself. The vows also included forsaking all others, Grace, I said, stepping away from her. You have been having an emotional affair with half a dozen women for our entire marriage, paying for their rent and their attention with my paycheck. You gave up on our marriage the first time you chose to click donate, instead of talking to me. I walked to the kitchen and called Francis, my brother-in-law. I kept the conversation short and factual. I am leaving the apartment now. She is erratic. Can you come over? Francis and my sister Violet arrived 20 minutes later. Francis, a large, imposing man with calm eyes, walked in and immediately assessed the situation, the scattered papers, my rigid posture, Grace's tearful, defensive stance. Violet, bless her, simply started helping me gather my essentials. I was methodical, packing only the clothes I needed, my laptop, and my important documents. I took photos of every room in the apartment, proof of the original state of the property. Grace followed me, pleading. You are making a rash decision, Brett. Where will you go? We can talk about this. As I headed for the door with the last box, Grace lunged forward, trying to block my path. Francis moved instantly, stepping calmly between us. He did not touch her, but his sheer presence and sharp gaze were a physical barrier. Back off, Grace, Francis said, his voice low and firm. He is leaving. You let him leave. I looked at Grace one last time, needing her to hear the reality of what she had done, not her excuses. I lived on 40% of my income for 4 years. I drove around with bad brakes because I thought we were saving. I skipped my best friend's wedding, and I told my family no to vacations. All because I trusted you when you said we had to save for the house. I pointed to the box of bank records. And all that time, you were spending my money on people who would not know your real name if they passed you on the street. You wanted to feel important. You traded our entire future for a 5-second shout-out. Francis opened the door and moved out onto the landing. Grace, helpless, ran after me as I loaded the box into Francis's car. She grabbed my arm. Please, Brett! I will delete them all! I will get a second job! Just give me a chance to make this right! I stared at her hand on my sleeve. You had 4 years of chances. 4 years of waking up every morning and choosing to lie to me. You are asking for a chance after you destroyed everything I worked for. You threw this away, Grace. Every single time you clicked a donate, you chose them over me. Francis gently pulled her hand off my arm and directed her back toward the apartment door. Go inside, Grace, now. I got into the car. Grace stood on the stoop, watching me drive away, the physical representation of the life I had just left behind. I was on my sister's couch, broke and temporarily displaced, but I was finally free of the lie. The couch at Violet and Francis's apartment was aggressively uncomfortable. The springs groaned whenever I shifted, and the bassinet with my niece was right next to the living room door, guaranteeing at least 2 abrupt awakenings every night. But even with the stiffness in my back and the lack of sleep, the silence was a profound relief. It was an honest silence, not the suffocating lie I had lived under for years. Grace started texting almost immediately. Long, sprawling paragraphs filled with self-pity, apologies, and promises to change. She sent screenshots proving she had canceled her most expensive Twitch subscriptions. She seemed to think that deleting a few apps was adequate recompense for $200,000 in theft and 4 years of continuous deceit. I simply forwarded the text to Francis, who told me to maintain radio silence. I met with a lawyer the following week. She specialized in high net worth divorce cases, but the meeting quickly focused on the financial fraud aspect. I provided the 273 pages of bank statements and the credit card debt records. The lawyer was professional, but her reaction to the sheer volume and nature of the spending, on streamers and online attention, was a subtle head shake that validated every ounce of shame and rage I felt. There would be no counseling, no attempt at reconciliation. My decision was final. I was filing for divorce. A few days later, I saw the notification pop up on my phone. The Cape Cod house in Brooklyn had sold. I stared at the listing photo, the pristine yard, the finished basement, the dream that belonged to someone else now. I felt a sharp, intense wave of grief, not just for the house, but for the life I had worked so hard to build, and for the trust I had foolishly given away. The loss was real, but I recognized that the cost of staying that lie would have been exponentially higher. During that time, while sitting alone one night, I reflected on Stacy's initial comment about Grace's motivation, the need for validation. It made me realize something painful about myself. I, too, had been chasing a form of shallow validation. My entire drive to acquire the perfect house was rooted in avoiding the shame and chaos of my past, in proving to the world, and to myself, that I was financially untouchable. I had prioritized security and control so heavily that I had shut down emotionally, making myself equally unavailable. Grace had exploited that fear, that emotional distance, but I had created the vacuum she filled. I realized that my own rigidity, my own fear of vulnerability, was the reason I had swallowed her flimsy excuses for so long. I didn't want to examine the relationship because I was afraid of the instability I might find. My arc had to start right here, on this uncomfortable couch, by accepting that true security was internal, not tied to a 6-figure down payment or a marriage certificate. The quiet, domestic rhythm of Francis and Violet's home, with the baby's random cries and the smell of dinner cooking, felt profoundly real. It was messy, it was loud, and it was genuine. It was everything the life Grace and I had pretended to build was not. Yesterday morning, I received one final text from Grace. I had not blocked her yet, needing the texts for legal documentation, but I was close. I just wanted you to know. The message read, Ela Ramos is taking a break from streaming for mental health reasons. I think you really hurt her by leaving. I read the text twice. My initial instinct was to laugh at the utter delusion. Then the coldness returned. I typed a reply. Grace, Ela Ramos does not care about you. She is taking a break because her main cash cow stopped paying. She is probably already moving on to some other lonely person who is easier to manipulate. I sent it. The words were cruel, but they were the absolute truth she needed to hear. I felt a final, clean break. Then, I opened my settings and blocked her number. I was done with Grace, done with the apartment, done with the fraud, and done with the fear that drove me to trust a lie. I was broke, sleeping on a bad couch, facing a complex divorce, but I was finally ready to start building a future that was real, not just financially secure. The dream house was gone, but the foundation of my life built on honesty was finally being laid.